Oh, hey, beep, beep, beep. Beep, 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 beep. It's me, Hot Ham Radio. I'm trying out some things. No, that's too loud. I'm playing with some little fun ideas around here. Let's see if they work. I don't know if that's distracting. So I'm just testing out some technology. Wanted to talk about this is too loud. It's going to drive me crazy. You know, that's what happens. That's what happens when old Hot Ham tries to get fancy. Am I right? We'll leave that on in the background. Thank you, Lo-Fi Commons, for the chill beat that's making me nervous. I wanted to play this. I was wondering if people have heard this. It's the original couple of interviews with Xana Kernodle's dad, or it was the first interview. I can't find the full one. So this was released by AZ Family, Arizona Family News, 7 months ago, November 15th, 2022. Let's see what we got here, huh? November 15th, 2022. This is about Xana Kernodle, who had ties to Avondale. I'm just trying to figure out how to play this at the same time.
In other news tonight, police in Idaho believe an edged weapon was used in the attack that left 4 University of Idaho students dead over the weekend.
Victims was a 20-year-old who had ties and spent lots of time here in the valley. We are on this story. Holly Bach spoke with her family, and what are they saying tonight, Holly?
Well, Yetta, we'll start with the fact that there are so many questions here. One of those students found dead inside of a home near campus is 20-year-old Xana Kernodle, who often visited her dad, who lives right here in the valley in Avondale. Tonight, her sister tells me their family is extremely confused about what happened.
This is stuff that shouldn't happen, especially in a small, quiet town like Moscow is, where we're heavily involved with the university.
Tonight, 20-year-old Xana Kernodle's sister sharing this message with me. My family and I are at a loss of words, confused, and anxiously waiting for updates on the investigation.
I never would have thought that this would have happened here.
Reports say the students likely died between 3 and 4 a.m., but weren't discovered until hours later after police got a call for an unconscious person and found 4 bodies inside of this home. Tonight, police saying they believe an edged weapon was used in this killing. According to Mad Greek, a restaurant near campus, Xana and Madison Mogan, another one of the students killed, worked there for several years. In a Facebook post, they say the two brought so much joy to the restaurant. The owners shutting their door yesterday to grieve. The university also canceled classes Monday and set up counseling resources for students and employees.
This is rocking their world. Many of them come from small communities where things like this have never happened.
Tonight, there are still so many questions. Police say there are currently no suspects in custody. They believe this was an isolated, targeted attack with no threat to the community. But they also say they are working to identify persons of interest. Xana's sister, mourning, saying you rarely get to meet someone like Xana. She was positive, funny, was loved by everyone who met her. She made me such a proud big sister. I wish I could have more time with her. Now, autopsies are expected to be completed later this week. That will hopefully be able to give us a better picture on the exact cause of death. The university also postponed a vigil until students return from Thanksgiving break. In the newsroom, Holly Bach for Arizona's Family.
Just an awful story. Holly, thank you. We've got new...
Weird. So I just wanted to re-listen to these. Good to see you, Kelly, and thank you so much. Hey, Bumblebee. Hey, Lisa Maxwell. All my favorites are here. Well, most of my favorites. I'm just sitting here trying to figure out my little technology stuff, but also wanted to show you some interesting stuff. Let's see, is this the one? Okay, this is the original interview, and I'm trying to put this out in mono. It's very difficult to hear in stereo the way it was put out. So, let's watch it again, shall we? This is the interview from, I believe it is. Well, you know what? That's annoying. 7 months ago, so this is from November 17th, 2022. Let's watch.
Learning more about a young woman with ties to the valley who was found dead with 3 roommates in a house near the University of Idaho last weekend.
Sarah Robinson talked exclusively with her father in Avondale today. Still so many questions, Sarah.
Yes, a lot of questions. Xana Kernodle was raised in Idaho, but she spent time here in the valley since her dad moved to Avondale a few years ago. He describes her as fun, smart, and strong-willed, and says it's impossible to imagine she was killed in the worst homicide police say they've ever seen in this small Idaho city.
She didn't really worry about the drama stuff that much.
Yeah.
She wasn't into that. She just liked having fun, wasn't worried about materialistic things. She was with her friends all the time.
Avondale father Jeffrey Kernodle, who was too distraught to be on camera, remembering the life of his daughter, Xana, one of the victims of the brutal stabbing at the University of Idaho, leaving 4 college roommates dead on Sunday.
I heard from her, I think before we went out, I think midnight. The last time I heard from her, and she was fine.
The murders happened early Sunday morning, rocking the small town of Muskow, Idaho, which hasn't had a murder since 2015, according to state records.
I have no idea. It doesn't make sense.
He says Xana was in constant communication with her family, and nothing about that night seemed unusual.
The door locks with the number code. Every time you open it, like I had to go around the house to get in the house because of the number code. So they either knew that or they just kind of went around and found the slider open.
A father struggling to understand how this could have happened. Why Xana?
They were just hanging out at home.
Yeah.
Xana was hanging out at home with her boyfriend.
2 other female roommates, Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves, were killed along with Xana's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, who Jeffrey loved.
Her and Ethan were together about a year, give or take some, whatever, but she really, when I went up there, I saw her just, a week before that. She changed a lot. She had a life. She got to see what it was to have a boyfriend to live with and have a real life. And she really turned around and was being really responsible, helping him out into studies and stuff. I was really impressed.
Kernodle says there's one thing the autopsy shows for certain. Xana, a strong-willed girl, fought her killer until the very end.
Bruises and just, maybe hurt by the knife or whatever.
Love you, Boston.
She's a tough kid. Whatever she wanted to do, she could do it.
A very disturbing case. Investigators say they still believe this is a targeted attack, but the killer is still out there. Live in Phoenix, I'm Sarah Robinson for Arizona's Family.
Of course it's a targeted attack.
Police say they've ever seen.
Okay. I'm going to play this again.
Strong-willed in the worst homicide police say they've ever seen in this small Idaho
17th.
city.
I just need to listen.
She didn't really worry about the drama stuff that much.
Yeah.
She wasn't into that. She just liked having fun, wasn't worried about materialistic things. She was with her friends all the time.
Avondale father Jeffrey.
There was something he said, though, at the end about her turning around, like things were turning around. I just thought that was weird. I hadn't noticed it before.
Kernodle, who was too distraught to be on camera, remembering the life of his daughter, Xana, one of the victims of the brutal stabbing at the University of Idaho, leaving 4 college roommates dead on Sunday.
I heard from her, I think before we went out, I think midnight. The last time I heard from her, and she was fine.
The murders happened early Sunday morning, rocking the small town of Muskow, Idaho, which hasn't had a murder since 2015, according to state records.
I have no idea. It doesn't make sense.
He says Xana was in constant communication with her family, and nothing about that night seemed unusual.
The door locks with the number code. Every time you open it, like I had to go around the house to get in the house because of the number code. So they either knew that or they just kind of went around and found the slider open.
A father struggling to understand how this could have happened. Why Xana?
They were just hanging out at home.
Yeah.
Xana was hanging out at home with her boyfriend.
2 other female roommates, Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonsalves, were killed along with Xana's boyfriend, Ethan Chapin, who Jeffrey loved.
Her and Ethan were together about a year, give or take some, whatever, but she really, when I went up there, I saw her just, a week before that. She changed a lot. She had a life. She got to see what it was to have a boyfriend, to live with, and have a real life. And she really turned around and was being really responsible, helping him out into the studies and stuff. I was really impressed.
Kernodle says there's one thing the autopsy shows for certain. Xana, a strong-willed girl, fought her killer until the very end.
Bruises and just, maybe hurt by the knife or whatever. She's a tough kid. Whatever she wanted to do, she could do it.
It's heartbreaking. I just wanted to listen to it again because the first time I listened to it, when it happened, I wasn't paying attention to the little details that much. So I'm trying to do that now. Also, the lines are open if anybody wants to call. This looped music might drive me insane. What do we say? Put a 1 in chat if you like the looped music. Put a 2 in chat if it might make you insane. Oh no, it stopped, of course. Wait till it starts again and then tell me if it'll drive you insane. But I wanted to, I know there's the new paperwork out, which I haven't read yet. It's 33 pages. I was thinking about reading it, but it sounds really arduous. Hey, Cranky. I've had that feeling. Yeah. Dunno. I have had that feeling. But I'm scared to talk about that on the internet too much. Maybe I'll try. So anyways, the lines are open. My number, as it says there, is 410-575-3733 if you would care to contact the moon. I think I'm going to get rid of this music. I mean, I'm sorry if you guys like it, but I might lose my mind. It's supposed to help, if you have if you're playing footage, it helps with fair use. But this was fair use. But, with those little robots that go around finding people. Yeah. I agree with you guys. I don't really know how to bring that up, but it feels kind of real. Actually, I don't know. I don't want to be I re-listened to the whole interview with Ethan's mom and dad, like the first one. It's like 21 minutes long, I think. And yeah, I've always had that feeling. I don't get it. If you guys want to call, it's 410-575-3733. It won't go to voicemail. It'll go to the actual Google Voice. It won't tell me who you are. I won't say who you are or what or what zip or what area code you're from, in case you're worried about that. All right, let's look at this mumbo jumbo. Let's see here. Boy, this looks fun, doesn't it? Doesn't this just look like a big ball of fun right here? June 16th. Comes now, the state of Idaho. Sorry, it cracks me up the way they start these legal documents. I ain't no lawyer. I don't think I'm going to read this whole thing. If people really feel a desire to read it, let me know. Let me try and skim it. Let's see what the old summary is, the old conclusion. How about that? There's good, they got to be wordy. They got to respond. Based on the above, the state respectfully prays. Is that normal to say they pray? What? Hang on here. Let me try and... Based on the above, the state respectfully prays for the court to enter an order protecting the IGG information from disclosure as it falls outside the purview of Rule 16. See? Look, we're learning nothing. In the alternative, if the defense can establish the IGG information is in fact relevant, the state asks this court to conduct the requisite in-camera hearing for the state to present information related to the IGG information and then enter a protective order under ICR 16.1 that the IGG information is not subject to discovery and need not be disclosed by the state. Well, that didn't help. So let's see. Let's find out what IGG is, shall we? They're saying a lot. I'm seeing a lot of IGG in here. Let's have a look. See now I have to find out. Oh, factual background. Okay. Comes now. The state of Idaho. They respectfully moves the court for a protective order for information related to investigative genetic genealogy. This case arises from a quadruple homicide. Law enforcement found the DNA of a potential suspect at the crime scene, and the FBI submitted the DNA to one or more publicly available genetic genealogy services to determine potential relatives of the suspect. The FBI then used common genealogical techniques to develop a family tree. Yeah. Okay, the state seeks to protect from disclosure the names and personal information of the hundreds of innocent relatives on the family tree, the names of the publicly available genetic genealogy services used, and certain other information described below. The disclosure of this information is not required by Rule 16 of the Idaho Criminal Rules and should be protected from disclosure for the good cause described below, including the state's privilege to protect the identity of informers. As described in Idaho Rule of Evidence 509. Okay. First time I'm reading this. Factual background. On November 13th, 2022, law enforcement found the bodies of Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. All 4 victims died from apparent knife wounds. Law enforcement found a K-bar knife sheath on a bed next to the bodies of Madison and Kaylee. The sheath was face down and partially under both Madison's body and the comforter on the bed. Law enforcement seized the K-bar knife sheath. Sorry, I'm making sure that you can see it too. Law enforcement seized the K-bar knife sheath pursuant to a search warrant. The Idaho State Police Lab in Meridian, Idaho. Wow. Oh, I know where that is. Located DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. The ISP laboratory determined the DNA came from a single source and that the source was male. Okay. Once law enforcement had single-source DNA from the K-bar knife sheath, they conducted what is called a short tandem repeat, STR analysis. A short tandem repeat. Okay, we're getting a little lesson here in DNA. STR, short tandem repeat DNA analysis, involves looking at 20 regions within human DNA and allows law enforcement to make a direct comparison between two STR-DNA profiles. I'm learning. Law enforcement submitted the STR-DNA profile obtained from the K-bar knife sheath to the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS. Okay. It's a database of STR-DNA profiles from convicted offenders, arrestees, and crime scene evidence. To identify the source of the DNA. No match was found. Oh, well, look at that. So Nancy Grace was right. She was right. Remember when she said that way back? There was no match in CODIS? Good old Nance. Let's see here. Unable to find a match using STR-DNA analysis, law enforcement decided to use investigative genetic genealogy. Ah, that's IgG. Law enforcement decided to use investigative genetic genealogy. Let's learn what that is. Okay. Genetic genealogy allows individuals to trace their lineage or connect with unknown family members using DNA. Typically, it involves sending a DNA sample, such as a tube of saliva, to a genetic genealogy service like Ancestry.com or 23andMe. The genetic genealogy service then creates a single nucleotide polymorphism SNP profile to use for genealogical purposes. A SNP profile is different than a STR DNA profile and is used more often for genealogical purposes. Okay. So well, I'm going to keep reading before I say anything. The genetic genealogy service then uses an algorithm to compare the user's SNP profile to SNP profiles submitted to the genetic genealogy service by other users to determine ancestry and potential relatives. I think we know this. The genetic genealogy service shares with the user a list of potential relatives and, depending on the specific genetic genealogy service, personally identifying information on those individuals, like their name, email address, and the amount of DNA the user shares with the potential relatives. The user does not receive any genetic information pertaining to other database users, i.e., users' DNA profiles are not shared with each other. Well, good. This same process, used frequently by members of the public, can also be used by law enforcement as part of their investigation, a technique referred to as investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. Once a publicly available genetic genealogy service shows law enforcement potential relatives of the suspect, law enforcement applies traditional investigative and genealogical methods to build a family tree in an effort to follow the tree to the suspect or a close relative of the suspect. Family trees can be used to narrow down a potential suspect based on factors such as age, gender, opportunity, known physical characteristics of the suspect, etc. In this case, investigators used IgG to begin the process of developing a lead to the individual who left DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. The Idaho State Police utilized a private laboratory to develop an SNP profile from the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. The private laboratory started using genetic genealogy to develop a family tree, but after law enforcement decided the FBI would take over, the private laboratory ceased its efforts and sent the SNP profile to the FBI. The FBI uploaded the SNP profile to one or more publicly available genetic genealogy services to identify possible family members of the suspect based on shared genetic data. The FBI could then view, through the Genetic Genealogy Services portal, information regarding potential relatives of the suspect who left DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. Based on information the FBI could see in the Genetic Genealogy Services portal, the FBI went to work building family trees of the genetic relatives to the suspect DNA left at the crime scene in an attempt to identify the contributor of the unknown DNA. The FBI built the family tree using the same tools and methods used by members of the public who wish to learn more about their ancestors. For example, the FBI consulted social media, viewed vital records such as birth and death certificates, and viewed other information already contained in the user portal for the Genetic Genealogy Service, including unverified information submitted by other users of the Genetic Genealogy Service. Including unverified information. What? The FBI also consulted some subscription-based databases available to law enforcement for information on individual people. The product of the genealogy conducted by the FBI was a family tree that contained the name, birth date, and death date, if applicable, of hundreds of relatives as well as their familial connections between each other and the suspect, Brian C. Koberger. The FBI then sent to local law enforcement a tip to investigate defendant. Wait, what? Did I miss where? How did that determine the suspect? Did I miss something? Yeah, Cranky, I get real twisted with this. That's why I wanted to read it out loud so I can like process and, you know, you guys can tell me what you think. Because I might be missing something, but it sounds, from what I've read so far, they're talking about the suspect again. They're not saying how they got to him. Hopefully they explain that. The IGG, okay, the FBI, okay. What, let me read this paragraph again, okay? Well, not this whole thing, this is absurd. The FBI built the family tree, blah, blah, blah. They looked at social media, viewed vital records, blah, blah, blah. Looked at the user portal, unverified information. Then they looked at subscription-based databases. The product, here we go. I can't highlight. The product of the genealogy conducted by the FBI was a family tree that contained the name, birth date, and death date, if applicable, of hundreds of relatives, as well as their familial connections between each other and the suspect, Brian C. Koberger. But how did you get to the suspect? The FBI then sent to local law enforcement a tip to investigate defendant. What? I think I'm crazy. Like, where did Brian Koberger come from? Like, where did that come from? The product, oh, they better get more detailed here. The IGG process pointed law enforcement toward the defendant, but it did not provide law enforcement with substantive evidence of guilt. Sorry, I'm getting a little cranky over here, too. The FBI did not, for example, conduct a direct comparison between the SNP profile from the K-bar knife sheath and defendant's SNP profile. That type of direct comparison required the more traditional STR DNA analysis, which was conducted by the Idaho State Police, not the FBI. Okay. Prior to the FBI's IGG efforts, so prior to the FBI's genealogy stuff, the Idaho laboratory developed the traditional STR DNA profile from the DNA found on the K-bar knife sheath. After see what? Look at, and then they just go right to after identification of defendant. How did they get there? Law enforcement recovered trash from the home of defendant's parent. It's a hunch, you guys. They went on a hunch. That's what I think. I think someone told him his name. Sorry, I'm like losing it. After identification of defendant, law enforcement recovered trash from the home of defendant's parents, and the Idaho State Laboratory did STR DNA analysis of items from the trash for comparison to the unknown crime scene DNA. Well, how was it unknown? Clearly it's known, right? They know to look through Brian Koberger's trash. Right? Tell me if I'm missing something. I'm just like, what? It's a fugazi, a fugazi, a fugazi. Comparison to the unknown crime scene DNA. That comparison indicated the DNA found on the trash belonged to the biological father, of the individual who left the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath. Pursuant to a search warrant, law enforcement then collected DNA from defendant via a Bueller swab. A traditional STR DNA comparison was done between the STR profile found on the K-bar knife sheath and defendant's DNA. The comparison showed a statistical match. Okay, we get that. But how did they get there, you guys? Specifically, the STR profile is at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to be seen if defendant is the source than if an unrelated individually random select. Okay, this is gobbledygook, clearly. Apparently it means we're supposed, like, that's he's 5.37 octillion times more likely to be the one than anybody else. Okay, I'm glad you guys are on the same wavelength, because sometimes I think I'm losing my mind with this case. It's one of those cases that's like, oof, the waters are muddy. I change my mind every day. Okay, I don't know if I'm going to try and skim some of this if possible, but they're really doing a good job at making it real dense. The genealogy conducted by the FBI resulted in a lead that pointed law enforcement to defendant, but it did not result in the creation of many documents or records. Oh, well, how about that? Gosh, there aren't any records? Oh, that's strange. Much of the information relied on by the FBI was only viewed through the user portal in the publicly available genetic genealogy services and other investigative databases. The FBI did not download or create copies of those records. Once defendant was in custody, the FBI removed the SNP profile from the genetic genealogy services pursuant to the policy. This means the FBI no longer has access to view much of the information it used to... Okay. So they got rid of it because of this law. So they don't have it anymore. To the state's knowledge, the only records that reflect the FBI's efforts to create defendant's family tree is the family tree itself. Notes jotted down by FBI agents as they constructed the family tree, and any records created to document the removal of the SNP profile from the genetic genealogy services pursuant to the DOJ policy. The state has not seen, nor does the state possess, these records or copies of this record. Ugh. Okay. Here we go. Argument. The state seeks a protective order for a narrow category of information, namely information related to the use of IgG in this case. So the genealogical information. Idaho Criminal Rule 16 governs discovery in criminal proceedings. Rule 16 is broad, but it is not a free-for-all. The rule contemplates the exchange of discrete categories of information between the state and the defense. As relevant here, the rule contemplates the state will provide 3 discrete categories of information: any material or information that would tend to negate the guilt of the accused, any documents or objects that are material to the preparation of the defense, intended for use by the prosecutor as evidence at trial, or were obtained from the defendant or belong to the defendant, and reports of scientific tests or experiments. Kind of sounds to me like the state gets to decide whatever the defense sees. I don't know. If a defendant believes he should receive information that does not fall within one of the discrete Rule 16 categories, the rule allows the defendant to seek an order from the court for information where the defendant can show a substantial need for the information in the preparation of his case. Here, defendant served on the state a request for discovery that calls for the IgG information, even though the IgG information falls outside of Rule 16, without first obtaining an order from this court. Oh, okay. The state now seeks, and the court should enter, an order protecting the information related to the use of IgG in this case. So does that mean that the defense should have obtained an order from the court before requesting that discovery? Is this like a gotcha? Specifically, the state seeks to protect. Okay, this sounds important. Yeah, I don't know, Lisa. I'm just lost in this sauce. Specifically, the state seeks to protect the following information: the raw data related to the SNP profile and the underlying laboratory documentation related to the development of the profile, such as chain of custody forms. Okay, does this mean a protective order from the public or a protective order from anyone, from the defense? Anybody? So they're basically saying any of the raw, sorry, I haven't eaten anything. You're going to hear my stomach. The raw. So basically they're saying we're not going to show you anything, including the chain of custody forms. We're not going to tell you anything about this DNA or how we got it. All information, continuing here, all information related to IgG efforts in creating a family tree and identifying defendants' potential relatives, including the identities of the genetic genealogy services and the personally identifying information of defendants' relatives. Okay, the state does not seek to protect and has or will disclose the following information: a genotype kit report from the private lab utilized by the Idaho State Police, which documents that a DNA test was performed. Okay. Information related to the STR DNA analysis conducted using the DNA recovered from the K-bar knife sheath and the DNA recovered from defendant's parents' trash. Okay. And information related to the STR DNA analysis conducted using the DNA recovered from the K-bar knife sheath and the DNA recovered from the defendant via the swab. This court should grant an order protecting the IgG information in this case because the IgG information does not fit into any of the discrete categories listed in Rule 16. And good cause exists to protect the information, including the need to protect the privacy of defendants' relatives. A. Rule 16 does not require the disclosure of the IgG information because the IgG information is not exculpatory. Okay. Rule 16A of the Idaho Criminal Rules does not require the disclosure of the IgG information because the IgG information does not tend to negate the guilt or reduce the potential punishment of defendant. The rule requires the state to disclose any material or information in the prosecuting attorney's possession or control. That tends to negate the guilt of the accused as to the offense charged, or no, they mean to say that as any material or information in the prosecuting attorney's possession or control, ... that tends to negate the guilt of the accused as to the offense charged, or that would tend to reduce the punishment for the offense. As written, this rule largely mirrors the federal Brady requirement that the state produce to a criminal defendant all material exculpatory information. Oops. They do not require the prosecutor to make a complete and detailed accounting to the defense of all police investigatory work on a case. So we can still keep stuff quiet. While the question of whether IgG information must be disclosed as exculpatory is one of first impression in Idaho, courts outside of Idaho have correctly decided that IgG information need not be disclosed as exculpatory. Okay, so they're going to sample stuff like this. Okay, they're bringing up this case of something found on a nightgown. Okay. You guys can go read this. It's on iCourt. Okay. Something about that. Well, let me read this really quick. Let's see what this nightgown thing is. I heard something about a nightgown. So in this other case, in Green, law enforcement used DNA recovered from the victim's nightgown to identify the defendant as a possible suspect. Then they surreptitiously recovered items from the defendant's garbage that contained DNA and found through STR DNA testing that the DNA in the defendant's garbage matched the DNA found on the victim's nightgown. A saliva test then confirmed that the defendant's DNA matched the DNA on the victim's nightgown. And the defendant moved to compel the disclosure, and it was denied. I wonder what the result of that was. As this case illustrates, the state is not required to disclose the IgG information under Rule 16a because the IgG information the state seeks to protect is not favorable to defendant. He doesn't need to see it. On the issues of guilt or punishment. This seems a tad... They're making a couple of assumptions here. The information provided to local law enforcement by the FBI was nothing more than a tip, a lead. This is written in here. The information provided to local law enforcement by the FBI was nothing more than a tip, a lead for local law enforcement to follow up on should they choose to. What? So who found it? And how? The genealogical tip did not prove or substantiate defendant's guilt. Rather, the tip allowed local law enforcement to focus their investigation on defendant and obtain independent material evidence of his guilt, all of which the state has disclosed or will disclose. My God. Wow. Specifically with respect to DNA, an STR DNA analysis found defendant's DNA matched the DNA collected from the K-bar knife sheath. To the extent the IgG information has any relevance, the fact that it led law enforcement to defendant means it is inculpatory rather than exculpatory in nature. Thank you for that explanation. Thus, Rule 16 does not require the disclosure of the IgG information because it's not relevant, blah, blah, blah. It does not satisfy any of the following. Okay, so the nature of the information is not required under that rule also, which the rule requires the disclosure of books, papers, documents, photographs, tangible objects, and buildings or places only when they are 1, material to the preparation of the defense, 2, are intended for use by the prosecutor as evidence at a trial, or 3, were obtained from the defendant or belong to the defendant. What? The IgG information does not satisfy any of these criteria. How is that possible? And how can they say that it is not material to the preparation of the defense? And when they say belong to the defendant, what is... I'm very, very confused as usual. Exactly, Lisa. Yeah, it's just I'm just spitting out all the words that they spit out here, and it's just saying the same thing over and over, which is, we don't want you to see it. Okay? So continuing, first, the IgG information is not material to the preparation of the defense. Okay, tell us. Defendant is charged with killing 4 people, not with being related to a particular person. Okay. Hold the phone. What? Defendant is charged with killing 4 people, not with being related to a particular person. But they arrested him based on this information. Did they not get that? They arrested him based on this. Yeah, it's not about being related to a person. Like, hello? I don't understand. Maybe I'm just really not getting it. The mere fact that I would love anybody in comments, you can comment on this video later. I'm leaving it up. Please explain this to me. You know, if you think I'm being overly sarcastic here, I know that bothers some people. Please, tell me I'm wrong. I would really enjoy knowing. Well, let's hear. First, the IGG information is not material to the preparation of the defense. Well, gosh, defendant is charged with killing 4 people, not with being related to a particular person. The mere fact that uploading the completed SNP profile into a publicly available genetic genealogy service led law enforcement to relatives of defendant does not affect the strength of the evidence against him. Yeah, but that's why you arrested him. So is his arrest legal? You know? This is the whole problem. How did they get to him? The strength of the evidence against defendant in terms of DNA evidence depends upon the confirmatory result from the STR DNA analysis between his profile and the K-bar. Yeah, I know, but this happened after they had his name. As explained further below, the state intends to introduce the STR DNA analysis at trial and does not intend to enter any evidence pertaining to the development of a SNP profile or the tree building process for inculpatory purposes. The state has disclosed or will disclose the information it has related to the STR DNA analyses conducted in connection with this case. The immateriality of the IGG information to the preparation of the defense is perhaps best understood by way of analogy. I like that they italicized immateriality there. The immateriality of it. Tell us a story. Tell us an analogy. The tip that came from the IGG process is no different than other types of technology, quote unquote, hits that put law enforcement on the trail of a suspect. See United States versus Johnson. For example, in Johnson, law enforcement recovered a suspect's DNA from a ball cap left at the scene of a bank robbery. Law enforcement ran the DNA profile through CODIS, which resulted in multiple hits, including the defendant. Right? So that didn't happen in this case. A scientist narrowed down the hits to the defendant, and law enforcement confirmed it was the defendant's DNA after acquiring a swab from the defendant. The defendant moved to compel the other CODIS hits from the government, but the court denied his motion. No, this is nothing like this. It's so funny. The court explained that the DNA evidence material to the defense was the direct comparison between the DNA on the hat and the DNA taken directly from the defendant. Yeah, but they didn't identify him. Like, they didn't. I don't know. The fact defendant was first identified as a possible suspect based on a database search, italicized, simply does not matter. Oh my God. Okay. Moving on here, skimming a little. Moreover, the IGG information could not support an argument from defendant that law enforcement violated his Fourth Amendment rights by entering the DNA collected from the K-bar knife sheath into a genetic genealogy service. A defendant cannot prove a violation of the Fourth Amendment without first showing he or she had a reasonable expectation of privacy in the place searched. The K-bar knife sheath was abandoned at the scene, as was the DNA inside it. Defendant cannot show that he had a reasonable expectation of privacy in DNA left at a scene of a quadruple homicide, or in the genetic information of his relatives who voluntarily provided their own DNA to a genetic genealogy service. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm moving on here. Second, the state did not rely on the IGG information to establish probable cause. Okay, well, thanks for saying that. Let's see, though. Is that true? Show us the grand jury. The state did not rely on the IGG information to establish probable cause for the defendant's arrest. did not present the IGG information to the grand jury and has no plans to present the IGG information for which a protective order is sought as evidence at trial. Instead, the state has relied on and will continue to rely on the STR DNA analysis, comparing defendant's DNA to the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath to establish defendant's guilt. Again, the state has disclosed or will disclose information related to the STR DNA analyses conducted in connection with this case. Jeez. Third, the documents and tangible objects encompassed in the IGG information were not obtained from defendant, and defendant has no property interest in them. To the extent the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath once belonged to defendant, he abandoned that DNA when he left it at the crime scene of a quadruple homicide. Defendant has never had a property interest in the records that reflect the SNP profile developed from the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath, nor has he ever had a property interest in the information gathered from the genetic genealogy services using the SNP profile, such as the information provided to the genetic genealogy services by defendant's relatives. In short, none of the IGG information the state seeks to protect came directly from defendant or currently belongs to defendant. And thus, Rule 16 does not require its disclosure. Oh my God. This is scientific. Okay, results of scientific tests. This rule does not require the state to disclose what law enforcement does with the results of reports. What the? Am I crazy? Okay. They're going to talk about the scientific tests. And I'm not going to try to go down there. Good cause exists for this court to enter an order protecting the IGG information, and if necessary, the court should hold an in-camera hearing. Okay. What are we is this about the Kobergers? The Kobergers upon Kobergers? Okay, it's all their personal information. Okay. The process used to collect the IGG information required gathering information from several informants. The process used to collect IGG information required gathering information from several informants, including the genetic genealogy services to which the SNP profile was submitted, and indirectly from the relatives of defendant who hit on the SNP profile. Ooh. His family. That's interesting. We protect the identity of informants. The U.S. Supreme Court has explained to encourage the flow of information concerning the commission of crimes. Okay, we're talking about that, the genealogy. The rule expressly contemplates that in deciding whether to enter a protective order, the court may permit a party to show good cause by a written statement that the court will inspect ex parte. If relief is granted, the court must preserve and seal the entire text of the party's statement. Thus, Rule 16, standing alone, provides this court with the tools it needs to review evidence in camera if the court decides it cannot enter a protective order based on this brief alone. Okay. Okay, so this is about protecting... Even if this court finds that the IGG information falls within Rule 16, this court should follow the guideposts that Idaho's appellate courts have planted for the protection of informants. Defendant should first be required to establish that the IGG information is in fact relevant to the charges against him. If he can do so, this court should allow the state to present information at an in-camera hearing for the court to determine whether the IGG information must be disclosed. Huh. Okay, so let me read that conclusion again now that we've gone through this and we know that IGG is actually about the genetic genealogy stuff that the FBI was looking into for their lead. Based on the above, the state respectfully prays for the court to enter an order protecting the IGG information from disclosure, as it falls outside the purview of Rule 16. In the alternative, if the defense can establish the IGG information is in fact relevant, the state asks this court to conduct the requisite in-camera hearing for the state to present information related to the IGG information, and then enter a protective order under ICR 16 that the IGG information is not subject to discovery and need not be disclosed by the state. Respectfully submitted by Bill Thompson, June 16th, Bill Thompson and Jeff Nye. Wow, Special Assistant Attorney General. Okay. Well, it wasn't 33 whole pages. Bunch of attachments. So you guys, you can always, I will try to attach a link to this in the show notes. Let me know what you think. Thanks for joining me. I wasn't expecting to go live that long. I just wanted to talk about that. If you guys just got here, be sure to go back and check out that first video that I was talking about, the original interview with Xana's dad, Jeff Kernodle. I am crazy, Lisa. Yeah, this is pretty much, I don't know what, it's a fugazi, fugazi. Anyways, I'm out of here. I gotta eat something. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I love all my hamsters. I'm trying to make this channel just a chill space for people who want to talk about Idaho or other true crimes. I hate that I said the word chill, but there you go. All right, everybody, over and out. Beep, 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 beep. Thanks for